What's up, guys, and welcome to the Rebalance podcast, where we dive into topics that matter most when it comes to overcoming struggles, injuries, and finding balance in your life. Everybody's idea of balance is that bit different, so my goal is to give you different perspectives, practical tips, as well as expert insights into what it means to live a balanced life. My name is Robbie Cassidy. I'm a physiotherapist and a health coach, and I've been helping people reignite their love for challenge, overcome their fear, and find more balance in their life through the process of self-development. So, let's get into it. Hi guys, and welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm delighted to welcome on Zoe. Now Zoe is a mindset coach from Cork. Zoe, thank you so much for jumping on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate the invite. I'm excited to get chatting.
Yeah, geez, it's been a while. It's been a while since we chatted last. Do you want to give a little bit of an introduction to those who may not know you?
Of course. So my name is Zoe. I am originally from Cork. I met Robbie in Bali. Robbie was my physio in Bali, which we can get into later on. But currently I'm in Dubai. I've traveled around a small bit. But the reason that I'm allowed to travel around as I do is through what I do for my job. I'm a mindset coach. I basically teach people how to control their thoughts, their emotions, their anxiety, and help them achieve peak performance and be able to communicate better with friends and family so they're not as reactive and snappy as we all can be from time to time.
Okay, perfect. And I guess to go back and look at how you got into that or went down that path, yeah, what brought you down into being a mindset coach, and what does that involve? I know you were talking about beliefs, you're talking about values, looking at different people's like traumas in the past. Let's dive into that a small bit more because I'd love to learn more about it.
So I suppose for me, it was very much my own journey actually really got me into it. I have like a coaching mantra within my business, and it's the reason why I do what I do. And it is to help others in the way I wish I was helped when I needed it the most. So back 20-year-old Zoe, who was crippled with anxiety, who was using drink, drugs, everything to forget who she was, forget how she felt and why she felt that way. And I was using all that as a means of escapism. And there was no mindset coaches back then. Personal development wasn't really a thing back then. We didn't even know what anxiety was back then. I remember saying to somebody, why is my heart racing all the time? I think there's something wrong with me. Or why am I like out of breath? Like why do I feel so nervous all the time? And and all this. And now, obviously, there is so much awareness and we're so privileged to have that. But why I do what I do is because I want to be the person that I wish I had back then. And I kind of fell into it in a way. So it was during lockdown. I was always into my personal development in the years previous to lockdown. But it was during lockdown. I was sitting there bored. I was off work, like the house cleaned top to bottom. I had a lovely tan because that's all I was doing, sunbathing, going for walks and cleaning the house. And this random email came into, very important, this random email came into my inbox. I still to this day have no idea how I ended up being on this email list, but it was for this company that was doing this free life coach training course, basically. And it was like a 5-day course or something like that. And I finished it in 2 days. I was like, this is it. This is what I meant to do. And I know that's so cliche and it's such a real, kind of cheesy thing to say, but genuinely I felt like, oh my God, like this is it. Like, this is what I meant to do. And I remember being on FaceTime to my mom and my sister at the time because, lockdown. And I remember telling them, I found this thing. It's called life coaching and I'm going to do it. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go travel the world. And they were like, okay, cool. Sounds good, and I think they just kind of took what I was saying with a pinch of salt. Now, not to say they didn't have the belief in me, but I think they just were kind of like, okay. So went away then, was like, okay, I want to, go further into this. I want to get like proper qualification. So I applied to this company. I actually ended up getting a scholarship for this company. So I got qualified and that was May 2020. And I started doing on the side, and then I actually quit my job the following May. I was a dental nurse for years, and I quit my job and off I went. But for me, there was always something that was like, there's something missing. There was I can't describe it. Like there was something missing. I just felt like, what if? I can't even put my finger on it. And then I just decided, you know what? I need to go travel. I need to go see the world. I need to go experience experiences, basically. So I left my long-term partner, one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, but I wanted to do it. I needed to go do it for me. And off I went to Bali, which is where obviously I met yourself.
Yeah, and it's it's funny how just little things can have such a change in trajectory in your life. I remember for me when I was getting started, it was just that my brother actually introduced me to a guy, Paul Dermody, guy from Galway. He's an online coach, and it was only him. I'd never really considered it before until he had mentioned it to me. He was like, why don't you look at this avenue of like you obviously enjoy your mobility, you obviously enjoy your stretching, you're already involved in health and rehab. It's like, and there's not that many people online that are doing it at the moment. Would it be worth doing it? And just that little conversation, I'd say it was 10 minutes of a conversation, changed the entire trajectory of what I thought I was going to do the rest of my life. It's amazing. But I guess the next thing then is once you kind of look at that and you look at, okay, right, I have an idea of what way I want to go and what direction I want to go. Then you have to kind of take that leap and look at the fears around it and all the things that are going to stop you. So how did you overcome those as you got into it?
Just to briefly touch on this, what you said there, just about one little conversation. It's crazy. And I think sometimes it's nearly a throwaway comment that somebody could make. Something just clicks with you and you can't even put your finger on it. I remember listening to a podcast before and it was like, you're going to be tired at the end of the week anyway. So why don't you be tired for a reason? And I was just like, yeah, oh my God, yeah. And that for me, that's always allowed me to push myself in terms of effort. But just in terms of like taking the leap and facing the fears and things, I think it's about like understanding that the biggest risk of all, and I know this is such, again, a cliche thing to say, but the biggest risk for me is not taking the risk. Like, let's just say if it is something like travel, or if it is something like setting up your own business, I suppose you have to understand that if you don't take the risk, if you don't do it, that feeling of what if can eat you alive, right? And I think that's probably one of the hardest feelings. And I actually kind of experienced that because I thought I had missed the boat, because I only left Ireland to go travel when I was 31. And I thought I was kind of, over the hill. I was in a long-term relationship, we had the house, everything like that. So I thought I kind of missed the boat with it. So I've had that feeling of what if, and it's not nice. So I've kind of seen it from both sides. But then as well, it's like when you do take the risk, for me, if you do set up the business and it fails, you just go back to doing what you were doing beforehand anyway. If you go travel and it doesn't work out, you just go back home to the country you were going to live in anyway. So to be honest, there is no risk. Like risks are actually not a thing. The only time obviously that a risk is obviously if you're putting huge monetary, investment into something. But for me, risk in terms of having experiences, there is no risk.
There's no, exactly, because you're always going to gain so much from it. And I think the other thing is that I remember hearing a quote as well years ago, and I've heard it multiple times since. It was that you can never really fail, especially at business. And when you're looking at life or lifestyle, you can never really truly fail until you stop trying it, and until you actually give up on it. Before is the point that you can say, okay, it didn't work. But if you're still, even if you look at, okay, you take a massive leap towards something or in the direction you want to go, and you start working towards something and it doesn't go 100% your way, and you have to take a couple of steps back to kind of jump forward again. I think that's what a lot of people miss out on, because they think it's go, 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 and then it doesn't work, and then drop everything and go back to exactly what they were doing before. What are your thoughts on that?
Totally. And I suppose it's so funny because I was actually only having this conversation with the client yesterday. He's a business owner, and we were just speaking about online presence, and you do have to play the game, unfortunately, when it comes to the online presence, and it's a long-term thing, and I was actually showing him a graph that I have, just like my data basically, and I was showing him like a graph of like my growth in my business, and basically it was basically like a flat line. It was barely lifting off the ground for the first two years. And that's where a lot of people give up, when you're just going along and you're not seeing the ROI on what you're doing initially, and it's shit. It's hard. It's uncomfortable when you're not seeing the return on things just yet. And I think at times people, and look, we all want things now. I'm definitely a person like that. I want things now, and that's totally fine. But when it comes to things like, the long-term game, if it is something like a business, it's about understanding that playing the long game will always come back to you so much more. You know what I mean? It's like investment in crypto, anything like that, things like that. It is the long game. And I think like once you see that, okay, I do have to grind now. I do have to graft, I do have to put in all this effort, but it will all pay off. So if you are initially starting something up or trying something out, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's like anything. It's like moving country. You're going to have those times when you're like, this is really uncomfortable. Oh, these people, do they actually want me around? Or, you've definitely felt this yourself. Where you're like, oh, do these people want me around? Or they just, do they even like me? You go through all that uncomfortableness. But again, you stick with this. You keep on pushing yourself to go to the things, or you keep on pushing yourself in your business, and eventually it pays off. So I think giving up, for me, it is the only way of true failure.
Yeah. I think so.
Like if you, sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, like, it's the only way that you actually will truly fail. It really is. And again, it's a cliche thing to say, but giving up is really the only failure that you can truly experience.
I think as well that in that situation you were talking about, like where you're in a different situation, you put yourself into an environment that you're not used to. Like there's so many ways to make yourself uncomfortable, and I think that we become so accustomed to comfort that it becomes so the risk of, like, let's say, impending doom of actually trying to change our environment, change our lifestyle, change the type of life that we live. I think it actually becomes a bigger obstacle in our way. It looks like a bigger obstacle, but it's not that big of an issue. And I think what you're trying to get rid of first off is the grips of comfort. I think that's one of the main things that people really, really struggle with, is that, like, when you go to a new country, you're not going to know people. Like there's a lot of times that you're going to have to figure out what your environment is. You're going to have to figure out your neighborhood. I told the story before of when I came out here to Buenos Aires, of like the first day. First off, my Spanish was shite, and it's still not that great, but trying to get an understanding of just the environment, because every time I said to someone I'm coming to Argentina, they were like, oh, you got to be careful. It's a dangerous place. Like it's like, just be careful because the economy and all this, they've all the reasons of not to go there. But I had friends who had lived out here before and they had all the reasons to go there. But once you just kind of, what's the word for it? It's like, it's nearly like you grease the groove. Once you kind of go, you figure out where the first shop is, you figure out where the first restaurant is, come back, kind of reconcile, sit down, think back, reflect. That wasn't too bad. I know 2 streets, I know 2 blocks of 2 streets. Come back, sit down. That's me done for the day. Tomorrow I go out and work towards that again. So it's kind of chipping away to get into that comfort zone in a different place. I don't know if that's something that you experience, or if that's something that you would relate to.
Oh, 100%. It's like, I know Wim Hof spoke about this slightly before, where he was saying, we have become so spoiled now with our comforts. A video doesn't load in 2 seconds, we click out of it. The place is too cold, we turn on the heating. Like the place is too hot, you turn on the aircon. We are just spoiled in terms of our comfort. Like, and it's like, if we're uncomfortable and we have to be uncomfortable, we can't handle it. Like, we lose our shit. We can literally, and I think that's why, like, things like, your ice baths and stuff like that, they have become so, like, they have become such a good, decent thing for people in terms of like their mindset. Obviously, you know more about the physical sides of it, but in terms of like the mindset level, in terms of your resilience, that's why they do really help. But as I always say to people, if you like confidence, right? If you're moving away somewhere and you're putting yourself in these uncomfortable situations, you can't expect yourself to just wake up one day and just be really comfortable where you're at, really confident, and that's it, you're sorted. It's not like this, confidence in a place or a thing or who you are doesn't get like bestowed upon you, which I know sounds like a silly thing to say, but it doesn't. But that's what a lot of us expect. We think, I'm going to wake up one day and I'm going to be able to handle everything. I'm going to be ready. That switch is just going to, it's just going to be turned on. But the thing is, it's like you have to take small, consistent leaps of courage. That's all it is. Just over time. If you want to get confident at anything, you need to do the thing, whatever it is. You need to do the thing. Like,
that's a great analogy. Yeah, it is. It is small leaps of courage. Like, because is that the phrase that you use there? Small leaps of courage.
Yeah, small, consistent leaps of courage, and they will add up to become your most confident self.
it's like that, I think, is the perfect way to box it, or perfect way to frame it, because it's like, and it comes that way if you're dealing with anything. I think if you're dealing with a new language, if you're dealing with an injury, let's say if you're dealing with, like, a lot of people that I'm dealing with obviously have like recurring back injuries. And with that, what you're going to happen is, I don't know if you can hear that dog barking in the background. But
slightly.
Anyway, with that, what can happen is that a lot of people, they build up these fears around movement and what they think is going to affect them and what they think is going to cause them pain. And as a result, they do nothing at all. So they rest completely. And literally at the start, all you're trying to get people to do when they're dealing with a chronic back injury is to touch their knees, and then to touch their shins, and then try touch their toes. Like the smallest little improvements every day, looking for that 1% improvement every day. But people think when I be like, okay, right, we're going to try get you running in the next 6 to 8 weeks. They'd be like, no, that's never going to happen. It's like, well, we're not going to do it tomorrow. We're going to start off by trying to work your way down the body and see if you can get down to the toes. And the body responds to that. In your situation, what are some of the obstacles that your clients have come up against and that you have to overcome, and you have to try build those little steps and those little pieces of courage?
What's up, guys? Robbie here. I hope you are enjoying the podcast so far. I want to take a moment just to personally ask you for your help. If you're enjoying the podcast, would you be willing to share it with someone you think would love it too? Maybe a friend, family member on social media, or even if you just brought it up in conversation with someone you know. The recommendation means the world to us, and it's because of people like you that we get to be able to produce this podcast on a weekly basis. So thank you so much for your support so far, and I would love if you could help us reach even more people who could benefit from it too. Really appreciate you, and we're going to jump straight back to the podcast.
A lot of the time, it actually comes back to the internal dialogue. So the labels that they've given themselves, the identities. So example now, a client of yours who has, long-term back injury, and you're saying, we're going to have you running in X amount of time. And they're like, no, I'm not. The thing is, it's like, if they've decided in their heads, they're not going to be able to run, and they consistently have that internal dialogue saying, I'm not going to be able to run. It's never going to happen. Chances are they're not going to be able to run. Yeah, they might get there, but there's no guarantee, they have a lot more likelihood of getting there if the internal dialogue is of a positive nature. But for me, it's about understanding whatever you've decided you are, whoever you've decided that you are, whatever you've decided that you're not, whatever you've decided that you'll never be. So an example, how many people have said to you over the years, I wish I could do what you could do. I wish I could just move away. I wish I could travel. I wish I could just take those leaps. I'm just not one of those people though. I'm just not one of those people. Or I get this a lot, like, I wish I had your motivation when it comes to training. And I'm like, I don't wake up motivated. I didn't just, a switch again was just flipped and I'm like, yeah, I'm now this super motivated person. That doesn't happen. You just need to start taking the leaps. You just need to start consistently doing the thing, and eventually you become that person. So it definitely comes back to your identities, the labels, whatever you've decided that you are, that ultimately decides who you are. As I always say to people, like, whatever you tell yourself you are, you are. Whatever you argue in favor of wins. So if you're arguing that you're not a morning person, guess what? You're not a morning person, so.
And it's so simple as well. It really does come back to the language. I think it's a Henry Ford that said, whether you think you will or you won't, you're right. Which, I butchered that quote, but it's something around that. I think that's, it's something like it, when you look at the language that people use, especially when you're looking at, like, I can only look at it from the perspective of, let's say, injuries and injury rehab. A lot of people would say, I have a bad back, I have bad knees, my family have bad backs. Like, I don't know, the doctor said I'll never play sport again. Like, first off, there really isn't that many doctors that would ever say that in that language. But that's how you pick up on stuff from your environment, because based off the internal dialogue that you have yourself and how you feel and the beliefs and that you have around the injury that you have at the time. But it's crazy how sometimes we start saying things because we've heard other people say them, and then they just become a belief, and we have no idea how it's become an ingrained belief in our life. It's like, watch your back. Be careful of your knees. Don't squat or don't run. It's bad for your knees. Like, just crazy things that you've heard one person say it. You might have been in a kind of a high emotional state at the time they said it. You've taken that on, and now 3 months later, you're not running because it's bad for your knees and you're sitting on the couch. You don't want to do that. I think that's a huge one that happens to people that I deal with anyway, is like what's going on in their environment
how that affects them and then how they pick it up and then they form their beliefs. Is that something that you've come across?
Well, 100%. Like even on a personal level, I had a teacher pass a comment to me when I was like really young. You're talking like first class, and she said to me, "You're not like the other girls. Like you won't work. You'll be at home with the kids." Basically, a roundabout way of kind of saying, you know, you're a bit stupid. So obviously, she was the teacher. I took her word as gospel because I thought she knew better than me. So I was like, okay, cool. She knows that, so she knows better than me. So, you know, it must be the truth. So I ran with that. And in my head, now this is where, you know, I thought I was being really smart here. I was like, okay, if I'm stupid, I can get away with everything, because what's the point in me trying in exams? What's the point in me studying? Because I'm just wasting my time because I'm stupid anyway. So that was me, you know, being a little bit of a smart ass there. So I was like, okay. So basically I just ultimately stopped trying. I carried that belief with me the whole way through primary school, the whole way through secondary school. I actually ended up getting 90 points in my leaving cert. Didn't even make the treble digit mark, which I don't think I've yet to meet a person who has less points than me in their leaving cert. Wear that with pride. And then one day I was like, hang on, is this actually true? Like, hang on, like I've never even challenged this. And I don't know what was kind of the moment where I was like, it's time to challenge yourself here, Zoe. And kind of see, like, is this true? Yeah. And I did, and I just started kind of trying things and just kind of testing myself and just kind of getting an understanding of like, hang on now, am I actually stupid? And just started testing the waters with things. And now, obviously, I'm running a business. I'm doing things and achieving goals that I never in a million years, like the child version of myself would have never, ever thought that I would have been doing. And that's the power of a belief, as you said. Somebody saying one little thing can make such an impact on you. And that's the power of a belief, how much it impacts you. Like, it literally impacted me for probably 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
You know?
From a young age as well, from a teacher, like, and the thing is, I bet you that's something that they like. The other thing is, you looking at it from both perspectives, that teacher could have just been having a bad day. You know what I mean? Like that person could have been in a position there, and they just said something as a throwaway comment. I don't know exactly, but I'm just saying, when you look at how malleable our beliefs are based off of what other people say, and it could be that person just on a normal day, they might not never say anything even close to that. But on that day, they were in a high emotional state, or they were pissed off, or something was going wrong, and they said it, and now you picked up on it. Like, how often has that happened to people?
That's the thing. It's
crazy.
It shows, like, that's how important environment is. Like, we do soak things up. Like, we really do. Honestly, living in Tenerife, the Spanish are quite laid back. You know, they have a different lifestyle. Everything actually impacted me. I don't know if you feel the same now, obviously being in South America, but for me, I found like my sleep patterns were off. Like, I'm a person who's been like early to bed for years, but when I moved to Tenerife, I just wasn't going to sleep until like 12 o'clock. And I was like, how is this impacting me? Like, that's because that's such a Spanish way of life. They're very laid back, you know, they don't have like they're not known for late dinner, like, you know, they're not known for, you know, like this, like, you know, like maybe like the Irish people who would be like work, you know, that real graft, which look, I have to admire that lifestyle as well at the end of the day. But, you know, that wasn't the place where I could really take my business to the next level. Moving to Dubai, obviously, look, Dubai is Dubai. It's, you know, a different gravy out here. And it's inspiring. And for me now, I can feel myself pushing myself just that little bit more, you know, and that for me, it's like, that's the power of the environment. Like,
oh, crazy. And it's the little cues as well. It's the little cues within the environments. I know Tenerife, I loved Tenerife. It's one of my favorite places to go because it's like a nice disconnect. It's obviously depending on where you're living there. But Buenos Aires is the same. I like, let's say I've been to Argentina and Uruguay are the two places that I've been to down here. And mostly around this city. I've been to a couple of other cities, but it seems to be the same way. Like, a friend of mine arrived recently from Ireland, and he's like, it's like this city is on like a 0.75 speed. You know, if Ireland is running at normal speed, this is definitely at a 0.75, and it really is. But
as you said, if you let that environment take control of you as well, it's easy to fall into the 11 o'clock at night dinners. Like they don't start going out here till 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. The nights don't finish till 6, 7 in the morning on a standard night because the places stay open. So if you it happened to me earlier on the year that became, I was like, I just kind of fell into the environment. And I think there is a definitely an element of it that the environment has a huge effect on you, but there's another element, I think, the discipline and trying to train yourself. If you can train yourself in an environment as well, I think it can really stand to you. Like you can be in Dubai, but Dubai is also known for people going out and partying and all that. You know, there's that aspect to Dubai as well. So it's kind of the side that you choose and the side that you pick, and then how you can stay disciplined within that environment. How are you finding that as a now? Is it you putting yourself into those situations, or how are you doing it so that you're able to stay in the situation of like the development and the growth aspect of Dubai as opposed to the party aspect?
For me, it's definitely all about like, why am I doing things? You know, like I'm really staying connected to why do I want to do this thing? You know, like I just recently done a photo shoot that was last Friday, and for me it was like, why am I doing this photo shoot? Just an example, you know, like why am I doing this photo shoot? Why am I putting myself through this challenge? You know, I'd be out with a couple of friends and they'd be having some drinks. You know, they'd be getting, you know, a big pizza, burgers, all this, like, you know, and I'm sitting there with a Coke Zero. And it's just about like understanding, why am I doing this? You know, like what's actually the reason? And I know for people who might be, you know, living in Ireland and stuff, who are the people who get up early, you know, and they want to, you know, push themselves and they want to, you know, do the personal development things and stuff like that. And Ireland has come a long way. It really has, but we still have a bit to go in terms of, you know, the personal development and pushing themselves and things like that. And I felt that myself back there when I lived in Ireland. I would be getting up at, you know, 5 a.m, going training before work. You know, I was going for sunrise swims, you know, in December and stuff like that. And people would be like, what are you doing? What are you doing that for? You know, and it's like, because it makes me feel good. You know, I like doing it because it adds to my life, you know, and it's all leading me towards something. And even another example, back when I was in my day job, I would go down to, I worked in Cork City, and I would go down to like the boardwalk, and I would go down there on my lunch break with my personal development books, my psychology books, and people in work would be like, what are you doing? What are you going down there reading those books for, you know? And I was like, because I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to become a mindset coach. And they were like, okay, you know, and they didn't really get it, you know, that way. But it's like, I was like, no, I want to learn, you know, because I want this for me, because it's all part of my vision. And it's funny because people only see your discipline as weird when they can't see your vision. But when you know where you're going and you know what your why is, there's a reason for your discipline. And if other people don't see it, that's on them. But for the person who's doing the thing, if you know what your why is, like that's a power in itself, being able to hold that vision and know that, yeah, this is uncomfortable, this is a bit shit. I would rather, you know, eat the nice food, or I would rather go out. I would rather not, you know, do the extra bit of work or whatever. But when you can see your vision as to why you're doing the thing, I think that sometimes is that's the reason that you'll keep going and you'll stick to the plan and stick with the discipline.
Yeah, the Simon Sinek as well, isn't it? What's your why? What's it?
Massive.
Huge, yeah. I think it's another, like looking at that from another perspective as well, as you were still in the job and you decided at a certain point of the job that you were going to take that part of the day where you're going to get 1% better and work 1% more towards getting into the position that you want to be. It wasn't that, okay, quit the job, start reading the books. You know, it's like read the books, continue on with the job, make those little improvements, and then transition when possible. Like people forget that's how it works. It's not that you just cut it off and then go for the next thing. It's like when you're building those habits, I find anyway, for me, it's literally just doing the small thing, like doing the smallest thing first, like where it's like recently, this is a very Instagrammable way of looking at it, but recently my morning routine has become very strict in that for the last couple of months anyway, I get up, I go outside, I stand on the balcony, I take in a bit of sun, and then I sit down and I do like a 12 to 14 minute meditation. After that, I will either do reading or I'll do journaling. Very Instagram like style, but there's a reason that it's promoted so much on Instagram as well, because it's such an effective way.
But I didn't start doing that all 100% every day. It literally started with try get up out of bed and stand out in the balcony for a few minutes. And then I had a bit of spare time because you feel a bit more alive and a bit more awake. So what will I do with that next 15 minutes? Well, I'd either make a coffee, or I used to go on my phone, or I used to do this or that and the other. Cut the phone off and say, okay, right, don't go on that till 9 o'clock. So now I have another hour here. Like, what am I going to do with that extra hour? I need to fit in little things along the way. But it is those 1% improvements that you do. It's like so little changes. But I think people just think it's like you snap your fingers and now you have this healthier lifestyle. There's so much more involved in it on a micro level as opposed to the huge macro changes that you see. And I'm sure it's the same with the transformation that you made. Like the little things that we're building up all along throughout the last couple of years.
Massive. It is. And like, even in terms of, again, just like if people that are listening to this and are thinking about setting up the business or something, you're going to have to graft. You're going to have to, have those late nights, those early starts, if you do want to make something like that work, so that's just a little side note on that. But I have like a quote that I kind of use with it's not really a quote, but it's kind of a system that I use with my clients. And it's, I want you to be I want you to be inconsistently consistent, which I know sounds a bit weird, right? So what I mean by that is do the thing as much as you can with it being not perfect, right? So if you can only do your morning routine when it's absolutely perfect. So if you have 5 things in your morning routine and you'd only do the thing if you can do all 5 things perfectly. Realistically, the amount of times you're actually going to do the 5 things absolutely perfectly, call a spade a spade. It's not really going to happen. So This is why I say to people, like, do it consistently and consistent, which I know sounds so weird when I say it to people, and sometimes I even confuse myself when I say it. But as I say to people, if you can meditate, if you're trying to pick up a meditation habit, and I rather people meditate for 4 days, 1 week, 3 days the next, 5 days the next, and they just kind of do it that way. Because the people, and I see this myself, when I have the people who start with me first, and we're trying to start up a habit, we're trying to bring in something new into their life, and they're like, yeah, I done all 5 things every single day for 2 weeks. I'm like, oh no, because I know what's coming, because they've done it so perfectly, they'll miss one day and then they've fallen off. Right. And it's not about how long you can stay on the horse, as I say to people. It's about what you do when you fall off. So if you fall off the horse, are you like, oh shit, I couldn't be bothered, I've given up now, I failed? Or do you say, okay, I missed that day, I'm going to get back on it? So this is what I say to people. I rather people do it messy. I rather people do things a little bit inconsistently, because that's actual true change, because that's how you create long-term change rather than a quick fix. Because when you do things perfectly, that's how you swing from the all or nothing mindset.
Yeah. Great point. Because it is as well, like you're never going to have, well, you will have it, like you might have a perfect week, but how often is that going to happen? And if you base your whole year off of how many perfect weeks you had, you're going to be probably depressed at the end of the year. Like realistically, if you look at it, because even if it's that, I think of that is that, like, when people attach it too much to the outcome or too much to the goal, that we get lost in it. Then if we fall off, it becomes so much more difficult to get back on. I was recently watching a video. I couldn't even tell you now who it was. I should think it was Alex Hormozy. He's a business coach. You may have heard of him. You probably know him. He was talking about being more locked in on the habits. Like, make the goal the habit as opposed to the goal, like this is a small bit of a change now to what you're talking about. But he's like, make the goal the habit as opposed to the goal itself. So if you want to live a healthy lifestyle, don't think that you need to do all these 5 things perfectly. Just think that to live a healthy lifestyle, I need to get to the gym. Like I need to get to the gym a couple of times a week. I need to exercise a couple of times a week. That may mean that I need to make a few more healthier food choices. But if it's, I need to make all healthy food choices and I need to go to the gym every day, that's an all or nothing. And that becomes a massive problem. So just making it like, I just need to tick these off a couple of times and watch it snowball and watch it build over time. And I think there's a huge momentum effect with it as well. Like, I think that people often underestimate the effect of momentum when it comes to changing it, because at the start, when you're trying to do something new, it's never really that nice. Like, what habit have you started at the very first one, and the first 10 of them were great in ways? Like, you always have that bit of resistance. I think it's as well, when you're looking at a habit or looking at building a habit, it's trying to overcome those first obstacles. So what are some tactics or strategies that you've used to help people overcome that when they do fall off the horse?
For me, I actually went through this week, a habit basically. So for the people listening, I done a photo shoot last week. I was doing a very long prep for that photo shoot, and this week, the weekend just gone, obviously I wanted to go out. I wanted to have some food. I wanted to treat myself. I wanted to relax. I wanted to take some time off training, and I wanted to have 1 or 2 drinks. All right, and that was my plan, and I done that. And honestly, when it came back to Monday, just going back to the regular foods, not been like, okay, I'm going for breakfast now and I'm going to have, no, I wasn't exactly doing the dog and I'm going for, McDonald's breakfast and all of that, but I was going out and having like, an eggs Benedict and, the large coffee, large lattes and, all the extra things that all add up. I was just coming back to having, okay, I'm just having a bagel there, some egg whites, small little simple things like that. And it's that initial thing of like, oh, I have to go back now to this, and it really reminded me of that whole starting up the new habit thing. And honestly, I actually found it a little bit difficult, even though I've been doing that for months. I've been doing those things for months and months and months. And I don't follow like a meal plan or anything. I do like a flexible dieting approach. That's just what works for me personally. But it's still, even so, I was like, oh God, I have to go back and eating, kind of plain foods that aren't being cooked for me in a lovely cafe, all of these things. Yeah. So I had like that first-hand experience again of like starting something up. But for me, in terms of like falling off the horse, as I always say to people, it's not about how long you can stay on the horse. It's about what you do when you fall off. So how quickly can you get back on the horse? Do you beat yourself up because you fell off the horse, basically? And it's funny because, when you're up on the horse and you have the good habits and, it's like for anybody listening who's dieted for a holiday, right? And you're like, yeah, I'm dieting mad for this holiday. I cannot wait to get on this holiday now and eat all around me. They've gone for the all-inclusive option and they're eating all around them. And then it gets to like day 6 of the holiday and they're like, I cannot wait to get back into routine. Yeah. And I cannot wait to get back to eating better foods and, back drinking my water as opposed to having, sangria and pints all day long. And it's like when you're on the horse, you think that it's a bit crapping up there. You're like, oh, I can't wait to be off it. Can't wait to be out of my routine. And then you're off the horse and you're like, can't wait to get back on the horse.
Yeah.
So that's why I always say to people, I'm like, when you fall off it makes you appreciate the habits that you had. This is why sometimes it is actually good to fall off the horse, generally my digestion Monday, Tuesday of this week from eating crap at the weekend. And I didn't even, again, it's not like I went mad or anything. I just had a few off. I went out for dinner twice and had breakfast out and stuff, but generally the digestion, I was like, yeah, this is why it's good to be up on the horse. But as I say to people, the first step is figuring out why you fell off the horse. Were you expecting too much of yourself? Were you trying to be too strict on yourself? Were you doing, were you trying to be perfect? Did you actually fall off the horse, or was it just, a momentary slip? And then secondly, then as well, understanding that beating yourself up is not going to help. That's the big thing. So many people think, okay, I'm going to wallow here. Yeah. And I'm going to stay here. And then they fall into the self-sabotage. And I have like a way of looking at self-sabotage. With self-sabotage, at the time, we don't realize that what we're doing is actually sabotaging ourselves. We think that what we're doing is soothing. So instead of self-sabotage, we think we're self-soothing. An example of this is, oh, I've had a really long day, I'm going to skip training. Oh, I've had a really long day, I deserve to order in the pizza. Oh, I've had a really long day, I deserve to, drink a full bottle of wine with my dinner. At the time you think this is the good thing. I should do this. I deserve this. I should be rewarded with this. But then it becomes apparent, you know what, that's actually made us feel worse. And then you fall into a little bit possibly self-loathing, a little bit of beating yourself up. And then that's when you really can sink into, well, look, I've had the bad dinner last night, or I skipped the training last night. I might as well do the same today, and it kind of goes on. And again, that snowball, that momentum. So equally, momentum can be great in some senses, but on the flip side as well, there can be such thing as bad momentum as well.
Yes, 100%.
100%. What are some examples then of that you'll see with people with self-loathing? Like, what are some of the examples that you see in your clientele?
Just very much talking down to themselves. And the more that you talk down to yourself, it can fuel this like overwhelm of anxiety. And obviously, like if you're making a mistake, if you've fallen off the horse, you've fallen off the bandwagon, and then you start with this self-loathing and you really start talking down to yourself, it can be quite hard to not believe what you're saying, basically. So if you're repeatedly telling yourself like, oh, you're stupid, or everyone hates you, it's very hard to not believe that. It is. It's very, very hard. Like, we've all been around a friend and they've said something about themselves, or look at themselves in the mirror and say they're ugly, or they're fat, or these horrible things that people like to say to themselves. And we're sitting there like, are you for real? Like, can you not see what I'm saying? And you're saying this about yourself, but that's the power of their words. And as I always say to people, if you can do that with a negative word, you can do that with a positive word. And in my opinion, affirmations, people see them as like this airy fairy, they don't really have much of an impact on us, but they really, really do. They really have such an impact on us. So affirmations are actually something I really bring my clients through, because I get them to try and change their wording with themselves, because the more that you can tell yourself something, the more that's going to sink into your subconscious, the more you're going to start behaving in that way unintentionally. You're just going to start becoming that person. So if you're constantly telling yourself you're never going to be a morning person, the chances of you snoozing your alarm, they're going to be a lot higher.
For me, affirmations are huge. They've always been huge. I've always I read a book when I'd say it was probably the first book I ever read fully. It was Mind Power by John Keogh. I don't know if you've ever come across it. It was years ago.
I haven't read it.
I was actually only recommended to a friend last night. It's a book that it's probably one of the only books that I've gone back to read multiple times. And when you look at it from the outside, it's a lot of it is based in like positive mindset and like having an optimistic mindset. And I know on Instagram, you've talked about like when a positive mindset actually is not a good idea, or not that it's not a good idea. It's more that it's like not effective, because you obviously need action if you have the positive mindset. And which I think is a great point. Because a lot of people just think, if I just think this, it's going to come into being. It's not. Like, you still have to do the stuff to get there. But in that book, a lot of it is about affirmations. And when you look at affirmations themselves, obviously you're taking time out of your day to say the same thing to yourself loads of times. I do it every morning, where you're saying something to yourself over and over again. And as you said, that seeps into your mindset. But what people don't realize, and the people that think affirmations are airy-fairy, is that like you also have other affirmations that you're saying to yourself, but you just don't count them as affirmations. They just become a belief. It's like the idea of, we question all our beliefs except the ones that we really believe in. And I think that a lot of people, when they look at that, or when they look at the affirmations that they use, and they don't really want to acknowledge, or maybe they don't realize that it's a negative affirmation. For me, I have a bad back is the number one. I have a bad back, or I have bad posture, different things like that. This is leading to my pain. When it's never leading, like rarely ever does posture or lead to their pain. And unless you've had a fracture or you've had multiple injuries in your back, and I'm not talking about like a bulging disc or something, I'm just talking about like multiple repeated traumatic injuries, can you say that I have a weaker back? But saying that I have a bad back is crazy, because that doesn't even make sense. It just means, like, what you're trying to get across to people is that you have back pain. But that's okay. People get knee pain. People get hip pain. You get shoulder pain and neck pain from doing different things. And if you go to the gym and you do RDLs for the first time, you haven't done them in months, you have hamstring pain because you have DOMs. But does that mean you have bad hamstrings? Not really. But you reframe it because you're saying, I went to the gym and it was actually a really good session, so now I'm expecting to have these DOMs. While other people say, I was out working in the garden and now my back is hurting me. It's the exact same thing. It's just different environmental cues. And really, it's the affirmation that you tell yourself. That's what I'm getting at here. It's the affirmation that you tell yourself in those situations that makes you believe or not believe what's really happening. And in the gym situation, it's a healthy one. So you say, okay, my hamstrings and my back are sore because I worked them out. In the gardening, it's like, my hamstring and my back is sore because I have a bad back. It's the exact same. I think it's so important when it comes to affirmations. I love them. I think you should do them every day.
But you need to look at the ones and the things that you're repeatedly saying to yourself and other people and try to change those. But then again, how are you going to become aware of them? I think having a coach is good for that. Obviously, it helps massively. How else would you recommend people become aware of the affirmations that they use or the language that they use that may not be as positive, as effective?
Something that I always try and do with people, especially first couple of sessions, is really let's create as much self-awareness as possible. I have a kind of a phrase that I use, and it's not the nicest of phrases, but it kind of it gets the point across, is if an alcoholic doesn't realize they have a problem, they're never going to stop drinking. They don't realize that every other problem in their life is stemming from the fact that they have a problem with alcohol. They're never going to stop drinking. Why would they if they don't realize they have a problem with it? And that's the way I kind of break down things in terms of my clients. So I'm like, okay, if you don't feel good, and if you're struggling with anxiety, or if you're struggling with self-doubt, or if you're just struggling just with a negative mindset overall, let's figure out like what's actually going on up here, right? Let's start thinking about what you're thinking about. And a lot of the time, people aren't thinking about what they're thinking about. They're just distracting themselves, going on their phone. They don't want to stay in on a Saturday night on their own because, God forbid, they'd have to sit in with their own thoughts. They get up in the morning, they go on their phone first thing. So they're avoiding their thoughts. And this is the thing, a lot of the time people are avoiding their thoughts. So basically my job at the very start is always just creating as much self-awareness as we can possibly create, because how are we meant to move forward and improve your life if we don't know what's actually wrong? Okay, so this is what I always say to people. Okay, so let's break down. So let's actually look at what beliefs you have about yourself. So what are the things that you constantly tell yourself? And I can see it in people from the very first time that I have a call with them. They'll say things like, "Oh, I'm just an overthinker. I always have been," or I've just always struggled, to just be motivated. I start things and I don't continue them, and it is just how I am. And look, I get it. We all have those little, qualities about ourselves, and I get it, right? But it's those words, they're so powerful. They're so powerful. When you say those things about yourself, those words, they will hold you back so much. So it's, first of all, it's always breaking down what's actually going on. What are the identities? What are the labels? And as I always say, your labels are chains. If you want to be somebody, but you're always telling yourself you're the opposite, you can only get so far. That chain is going to yank you back. It's like that label is on your collar. You're a dog and you're going forward, you're being yanked back by that lead, again, silly analogy, but just to get it across. But yeah, but it's true, so that's always the first step. So what's actually going on, and how, what do we need to actually work on in order for you to improve? And then we just start saying, okay, how can we break you free of that? So again, it's about taking those leaps of courage. So for me, it's not like, okay, if somebody's struggling with, they have zero confidence in themselves, genuinely there's self-loathing going on. I'm not going to sit there and say, okay, right, by week 2, you're going to love yourself. No, that's not the approach that I take. That's unrealistic. I'm very realistic in my coaching. People do require a bit of effort. If you've been telling yourself you're not good enough for the last 20 years, you're not going to change to I love myself in a week. We have to be realistic with things too. So I just start to slowly but surely, instead of I hate myself, just switching it to just I am a person, which I know sounds so silly, but you're just trying to change it from a hatred thing to a neutral thing. And just starting, and it doesn't even have to be acceptance for now. It's just like, okay, I am a person now. And then you switch from that then to a neutral. And then we kind of start shifting it then to, okay, who do I want to be? And you just start switching it slowly but surely to that. And it's boring, it's unexciting, it's not cool or anything like that, but it's like anything, slow and steady wins the race. It's like a smoker giving up smoking. What do? They resist the urge to smoke a cigarette over and over and over and over and over. And it's boring and it's not fun, it's unexciting, and it's, you have to have that willpower. And there will be times when people will smoke. There will be times when people will go back to that old habit, that old reaction, that old thought pattern. But you have 2 options then when you do that. You go back to being that person, or do you say, okay, that was just a blip in the road? And yeah, as I said, it's just that slow and steady approach. And eventually like somebody giving up smoking, the urge stops coming up.
Yeah.
It's the same with yourself. That initial reaction of I'm not good enough, eventually that stops coming up.
Yeah. And I that's a great point. And I like that idea of the label acting as a chain holding you back, because you use that sometimes as a shield as well. You use those labels as a shield to stop you. It's because you don't have the confidence to go outside it. I think that's why some of the diagnoses that people get are really dangerous to give people, because they're trying to put a label on something, especially when it comes to, like, obviously I keep talking about chronic issues, but in that situation where people put a label on it and now they live and die by that label. But I think that we forget as well, there's obviously diagnosis, there's things you can change, there's things that you can't change. But just as a side note, some diagnoses that I really don't like, especially when you look at giving to kids, stuff like, I think, labeling a child as ADHD. If they really are, okay, grand. I understand that there's definitely people who fall within that spectrum, but I've recently come across people who are using that label of ADHD, undiagnosed is the big one. I've undiagnosed ADHD that I hear at the moment, as a reason to not practice discipline. I don't know if you've come across that, but I think of recent times I've seen, for people that I've been working with, it's like you're using a diagnosis that hasn't been actually proven. You haven't gone through the criteria to say that you have ADHD. And a lot of the criteria, it's not my area of expertise by any means, but I think that a lot of people are using that, and then they're forgetting that, okay, well, I actually can train discipline. Discipline isn't something I have or I don't have. It's something that I can train. I think that outlook on mindset, we often forget that although you have one mindset, you can train other mindsets. It's the same as you train your body. It can be trained. But I think people just think that this is the mindset I have. I've had it since a young age and I'm stuck with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. And like, our brains are malleable. I think, like, we all had this belief, like me with the I'm stupid, is a perfect example of that. Like, just because you once were one way doesn't mean you are always that way forever, and I think that's a big mistake that people make. And an undiagnosed thing can be from, like myself, I'm stupid. It can be, ADHD. It can be, I had a client before. She was always known as like the kind of the saucy one, the person who'd always kind of pipe up, the person who'd always have something to say. And she didn't even want to be that person, but she felt like everyone else thought she was that person. So she just became that person. It's all things like that. They have a massive, massive impact. Even things like food, like people are like, oh, I'm celiac. Yeah. But they're not, things like that. Yeah. And obviously there are intolerances, and look, who am I to argue about what, inflames somebody's stomach or not, but I think a lot of the time it can be like, you are, maybe manifesting might be the wrong word for it, like, but if you're always telling yourself and kind of like making an excuse for something, you're always going to be it. You're never going to challenge yourself. It's like me with the I'm stupid thing. I kept it as a way to keep me safe. I did, and it held me back. So I get it 100%.
It's a shield. Like you're using a shield, and I know exactly what you're saying there when you said that about celiac, and it's the same as when I talk about ADHD. It's that, well, no, we're not by any means, how do you say, like, what's the word for it, where you're making it sound like smaller than it is, like disregarding the fact that there is people that have those diagnoses. They're sure 100% is. But the thing is that, first off, do you want to live and die by that diagnosis? Because you can decide on that. There's obviously little changes you can make with any diagnosis. There's always little improvements you can make with any diagnosis. But it's more what we're questioning here, and I feel we're on the same page of this, is we're looking at the mindset around what you are thinking in that situation. And if you can change the mindset, does the diagnosis change in time? Possibly, hopefully. Like, the goal is yes, but will you have better habits because of it? And overall, the rest of your quality of life will improve? Guaranteed. That's the thing. But if you want to use it as a shield, and you want to use that idea of, I have a bad knee or a bad neck, as a shield to not push yourself and not put yourself in situations that you're uncomfortable. If you're not aware of that now, hopefully by the end of this podcast, you will have a good understanding that you are using those. But if you want to use it as a shield, no problem. But if you really want to do stuff with your life and you want to really have a better quality of life and you want to kind of take those little leaps, you have to question those beliefs. You really do have to question those beliefs.
Like, I couldn't agree more. Like, it's so frustrating when I see people that are just like, no, No, I'm just not one of those people. And it's so frustrating because you're just like, if you only tried, like genuinely, if you only tried, like it is. And I actually get so frustrated. Now, I've definitely gotten better with just taking a step back and just not even trying. Because look, you can bring a camel to water and all that, but it is hugely frustrating when you're just like, if you just tried, like if you actually just tried, you have no idea what you actually could do with yourself if you just tried, genuinely. And I, like myself, I used to literally say like, but I'm stupid. And I can remember my mom saying to me, stop saying that to yourself. Like, you're not. And I was like, but I am, and I was like very matter of fact about it. Like I was like totally accepting it, like, but it was a complete and utter safety thing, because in my mind, I was like, well, if I'm stupid, I'm not going to try in an exam, because then I can't embarrass myself. If I fail because I didn't try, that's okay. But if I fail because I tried, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, that's a shield, isn't it? It is such a shield that that you live behind. And it can, I think a lot of it really takes control of our lives. Like I think we've all had that at different stages where, and you'll see it in athletes, you'll often say, oh, I got this issue when he hurt his knee. If he didn't hurt his knee, he would have been the best, he would have been one of the best players in the country. Like how many times have you heard people say that about different people, where someone has taken that on and now they've just taken it as, okay, well, I had that knee injury, or I had that hip injury, or I had an ankle injury, or I had a surgery on my shoulder, let's say. So now, like if I didn't have that, I would have been great, but I had that. So now what can I do? It's not my fault.
Yeah.
But like, for me, I get frustrated over it because maybe it's just, maybe we're not to use the word ignorant to it. And we don't mean to come across ignorant. I don't mean to come across ignorant when I say it, but like when you kind of realize that those mindsets can be changed, my God, the power it gives you over your life is crazy.
Like once you see that other way of living, you're like, okay, wow. Like, and I remember now, this is a very basic bitch story, but look, The Power of Now. I don't know if you've read it.
Yes, bits, please.
Yeah, that for me was like that, like literally light bulb moment. That was my moment where I was like, oh my God, hang on. I've actually been doing all this to myself. So somebody does something to me, but I'm actually letting that anger come up, like that it's on me, and it was just like, okay. And once you experience that other way of life, you're like, oh my God, like I was literally holding myself back. And for me, it's like, you have to be willing to call yourself out on your own shit. That initial moment of calling yourself out, that initial moment of saying, you know what, that was my fault. I fucked up. I done that. And you take ownership. That initial, it's like that tough pill to swallow. But the second you swallow that pill, your life will begin to change for the better. And that is something, I'm not a person for making promises, but that is something I can promise. If you take ownership that for everything that's happened in your life, and I know that might sound harsh, it is harsh, but it's true. Yes, you might not have done it yourself. It might have been done to you, but it's what you do with it going forward, honestly, and once you take ownership for everything and say, okay, I'm going to decide now where I go from here. I'm going to decide what I do. I'm going to decide whether I'm going to use that as a thing to hold me back. I can't do that because X, Y, and Z happened to me. Or are you going to say, you know what, I'm going to do this because X, Y, and Z happened to me.
Yeah.
Just that slight switch of perspective.
Yeah, it's so true. I think the other thing is that a lot of times people will say, like, when it comes back to the idea of failure, is like the shame of failure, more so than them failing themselves and losing confidence, is what other people will say about them. But shame only, there's a quote. It's like, shame only is hides in the. Maybe you have it better than me. It's like, shame only is in the dark. When you don't know, or when people don't know about the shame, or they kind of know, but you haven't really opened up about it, then it's a lot more powerful. But if you have said something out loud, I tried that and it didn't work, then you kind of own it. You have ownership. You take responsibility over it. So people can't. It's like that old idea of. And I remember I was talking to a friend of mine from years ago. He was saying that he came out of the closet when he was 13, 14. I don't know if even if come out of the closet is the right thing to say anymore, but I'm going to use that analogy. And he said when he was in school, people would come up to him and say, take the piss, and be like, oh, you're gay. And when he had owned it, he was like, yes, I am. And then, like, what else about it? They have no other power then to say anything else after that. When you have that ownership and when you've kind of taken responsibility for it, if somebody says something to you, they can't really abuse you about it because you've already accepted that is the way it is. But people forget, though, that if you're hiding it all the time, then you can be like, no, I'm not. What do you mean? Like, no, like, what are you talking about? Like, that never happened. Or you failed at something. No, I didn't. It just didn't work out because this thing happened and this thing happened. You failed at it, or you failed at it, or it didn't work for you. Oh, yeah, no, I tried these other things. Maybe I could have done something differently, but at the time it wasn't right. There's a different perspective on that, and there's a different control that you have over that. You're right on the defensive, or you're using it to improve you going forward. And if you take ownership of it, you can use that. But if you're on the defensive, you're not really going to learn anything from it. And instead, you're going to give reasons and excuses around it and why it's not going to work for you going forward, I think.
It is. No, it is. It's very true. It is. I think sometimes it's just, we can just be our own worst enemy, and I think, as I like to say, I think we all think we're the center of everybody's universe. We do. And I think this is a big thing that fuels anxiety as well. This whole thing of like, they're going to be looking at me now. They're going to be thinking that, this about me, and they're going to be thinking about what I said, over and over. And that's a big thing with anxiety, replaying situations over and over and things like that. But like, how often have you met somebody and replayed a situation in your head about what they said?
Yeah. Oh, happens to absolutely everybody. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I remember years ago, this was when I was like, anxiety was like at an all-time high. I remember being in the gym, seeing this guy in the gym that I knew, and he was talking to this other woman that I knew, and I was so anxious. I was like, they're talking about me. I think, like, I was properly like, they're talking about me. And then a few days later, I was in traffic, and he was stopped in traffic next to me, and I waved at him, and I don't know, did he just not see me or what, but he didn't wave back anyway. And I was crippled that night. I remember I couldn't sleep. This was literally just because the guy didn't wave at me. This is where my anxiety was at the time. And a few days later, I actually found out that his dad had passed away. But in my head, I was so anxious. I was the center of the universe. He couldn't possibly ever have anything going wrong in his life. It was all about me, And that's the thing. It's like, your mind can get carried away in so many different areas, like when you don't have a grip on it, like your mind dictates so many things. Your mind dictates your career, dictates the level of your relationship, it dictates your personality, and we only have one mind, but a lot of the time we don't take care of it. Like if you were given one car when you were 2, and that car had to last you until the day you died, like, you would be obsessed with that car. Like, you would be like, if you could never buy another car and that was the only car you could have, like, you would take such good care of it. Like, you do everything in your willpower to make sure it's in tip-top shape. But yet we have that with our mind. We don't do that.
Yeah. And it really, in that situation, like, it comes back to the basics, doesn't it? Because as you were talking about there, the anxiety of me, like, of you thinking that they were saying something about you and then he didn't wave to you, and how someone else's lifestyle or life and what they're dealing with obviously is going to affect their actions. So you can't be so tied to other people's actions in a lot of ways. But just a really easy example of, like, when it comes back to the basics of what mindset is built up of, with your sleep, your hydration, all the normal, like, they all have to be right first before you can start working on these things. And I think the easiest example of that is the fear the next morning after being out drinking the night before. Like, I'd have anxiety over nothing. Like, it'd be literally, I'd be waking up, I'd be like, I don't even know what the issue is right now, but I'm kind of nervous about something. And literally just from the drink, the fatigue and the lack of sleep. I think when you're looking at anything, or you're looking at building on anything, you have to have that foundation. You really do have to have that foundation.
Yeah, honestly, drink, it's definitely been something I've had a very much an up and down relationship with over the years. And I'm not in recovery or anything like that. And I do still drink alcohol every now and again. But I just have to be super vigilant with it because of just how it makes me feel. I never do anything when I'm drinking. luckily enough. For me, it's how I feel. And even for me, like as a business owner, I don't want to be only giving 90% in my business every Monday and Tuesday because I'm knackered from my Saturday night. Like that for me, I don't want that. I don't want that for myself. I don't want that for my business. I don't want that for my clients. That's just not good enough for me. And drink for me just makes me feel puts me at like 90%. The people your friend was saying, Buenos Aires is at 7.5 speed.
Yeah.
That's the way I feel like alcohol does it to me, and it fuels just this anxiety, and it just doesn't make me feel good. And the thing is that so many people are drinking every single weekend, and their life is at that 90% or that 7.5 speed all of the time, and they haven't broke the cycle. They're just doing it every weekend because that's the thing to do, because that's just the only thing that they know. Their friends do it, so why wouldn't they do it? And it's just, as you said, like it actually just puts you in just like suboptimal performance all of the time, and it makes people be irritable with their loved ones. It makes people be snappy with their kids. It makes people not perform as well in work, and if you think about it, like if you're doing that all of the time, and if you're at 7.5, if your life is at 7.5 speed, your entire life, imagine all of the opportunities that you're missing out on.
Yeah. And along with that is this, like the lack of sleep. I think that people don't, like the drink really affects you emotionally, physically, but then also has a knockover effect on your sleep. And there was research, they did research on some people years ago. I was going to say mice, no, but it was definitely people, because I remember researching it. And I don't want to hold you too much longer, but we'll finish up on this. But really, what they looked at is if you look at someone's sleep, you get them to sleep under 7 hours a night, and you have them to recall positive events or negative events from the day before, that they will, once you are sleep deprived, you're more likely to recall negative events consistently. And the reason being is that it's a survival tactic. It's more important for you to remember where a neighboring tribe is, or remember where a poisonous berry is, or a pride of lions, than it is to you to have a good memory of you playing with your kids. Like when you look at it from a survival aspect. So if you start sleeping under 7 hours a night, you're more likely to recall the negative events consistently. And if you're going out at the weekend and you're drinking, and then you're sleeping in the middle of the day and you're not getting to bed late that night, and then that knockover effect happens, and then by Wednesday you're starting to actually feel better again, then Thursday comes, you have a great Thursday, but then it's Friday and you go back and you start to do the same patterns again. You're getting one good day a week there. And I think that when you look at anything, when you look at injury rehab, when you look at in your situation, and obviously I know you'll know a lot more about this than me, when you look at like improving your mindsets and changing your mindset, it comes back to the foundation that you have. I think if you have a bad foundation, it makes it so much harder to build on those things and improve on those things. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on that before we call it?
The fundamentals, it's something that I always say to people. So people who might be listening to this, or even remember this for going forward in the future. So if you're feeling a bit crap, right, it's very easy for us to be like, okay, I need to do this, and this. I need to do these 50 things. I need to start a morning routine. I need to start, going for a 10-mile jog. I need to do like an hour ice bath, all of that, right? And look, we've all done it. We've all done those extreme things at some point or other. Okay, I'll be first to hold my hand up. But as I always say to people, if you can focus on the fundamentals, if an example now, a morning routine, right? As you were saying there, yours is, the Instagrammable morning routine. But the thing is, that's simple, but it's effective, right? So even for me, right, I don't use my phone as an alarm. The phone does not come into the bedroom with me. That's a big thing. I use an alarm clock, and I put it over the other side of the room so that when my alarm goes off in the morning, I don't even remember getting up out of the bed, probably 6 out of the 7 days a week, to be honest. I get up and straight away I just go into the bathroom, brush my teeth, wake myself up, and I just drink and make sure to just drink 1.5 liters of water in the first like half an hour. And I'll put on some music. That will make me feel good. And when I start my day off with that, if I don't go on my phone, drink some water, and I listen to a bit of music, those small little things genuinely will make me have a really good day. The thing is, though, is that if I was in a bad place, let's say, it's very easy for me to be like, that won't cut it. I need to do more, and you start thinking a million miles ahead. The thing is, though, if you can just have those simple things, now it doesn't have to be you're getting up, not going on your phone, listening to some music, drinking the water. It doesn't have to be that. Now, obviously, drinking water and not going on your phone is great. But if you can just have those small little simple things that make you feel good, stick with those. It doesn't have to be this massively complex morning routine or, nighttime routine or things like that. Just keep it simple. Do the basics really, really well. Honestly, even like a meditation practice, you're better off meditating every day or every second day for 5 to 10 minutes rather than, or even if it's 3 minutes, right? You're better off doing that rather than saying, okay, I'm only going to meditate when I can meditate for half an hour.
Yeah.
Because the likelihood of you meditating every single day for half an hour, you might do it. Realistically, calling a spade, probably won't. So I don't meditate for half an hour every day. Those days are gone for me, unfortunately. But now, to be fair, that's probably an excuse. I probably could. But it's just about doing the really, really, really simple things really well. And I say this to every single client that starts with me. The smallest changes, the smallest tweaks will make the biggest difference. And I think at the start, they take that with a pinch of salt. And then over time, they start to see it. So honestly, the fundamentals, create some non-negotiables for yourself. Non-negotiables now can just be 4 liters of water a day, 30 minutes of movement, not going on your phone first thing in the morning, and checking in with a loved one. Something simple,
Yes. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. I really like those, actually. I really like those fundamentals. I really like those non-negotiables, especially the one checking in on a loved one. That's such a simple one. That how often do we do it?
Yeah, that's the thing. Just simple text, hey, how are you? Or just tell somebody you love them. That's it.
Yeah, simple. They go a long way, though. They really do. And simple things done consistently, like the power of that it's unmeasurable, I think, when you do it, when you look at it. And it's only when in hindsight, when you look back, that you really realize that the changes that you've made. I think a lot of people are thinking that, right, one day they're going to wake up and they're going to feel like it's crazy, but you'll be sitting out having a coffee some morning, looking back, and I'm sure everyone that's listening to this podcast can do this now, and look at some situation that was going a small bit wrong for you, things that weren't going right at the time. And then if you look at your development after it, you can see that there was positives to take from it in some way or another. It may not always be the best way or the nicest way, but I think that we can always take positives from every situation. But anyway, Zoe, thank you so much for jumping on. And I really, really appreciate the conversation. It was an excellent conversation. I hope that people were able to take from it. People were able to enjoy it. Do you have any finishing touches there? Actually, just before I let you go, a question that I like to ask people, and I change it for everyone, but I think in your situation, it's, what does health mean to you? What does health or what does a healthy lifestyle, or what does health overall mean to you?
Health overall for me is definitely health in all areas. So I suppose for me, spiritual health, emotional health, physical health, like even in terms of physical health, as I always say to people, like, we're sitting here now, we're able to see each other, we're able to hear each other, our hearts are beating, we're pumping blood around our body, we're doing all these things, right? With zero effort. Our bodies are just doing it for us. And you mean to tell me you can't even reward it with just a little bit of exercise, a little bit of water, not abusing it with, crap foods, caffeine overload, and zero exercise. So that's what I always say to people. But with that being said, it's the same with your mind. Our physical health requires effort. Our mental health requires effort. Our spiritual health requires effort. So it is something that we aren't always guaranteed. And I think it does require that effort overall. But for me, I'm like, the three of them do really go hand in hand. It is mind, body, and spirit, 100%.
Yes. And just on that point, what's spiritual health to you then? Because I always think that's an interesting one, and one that I find difficult myself to define. But I feel that for me, it's more of a connectedness. What is it? What's spiritual health to you?
For me, that connectedness, just having that self-awareness, having that connection to yourself. For me, sometimes if I feel like quite disconnected from myself, or if I feel like if I haven't done like a meditation practice in a while, and I feel a bit like unempathic maybe at times, you just feel a little bit like not even cold, but just a bit like, cool, you know, just that kind of like as warm-hearted, maybe the words. That to me, that's when I get a little bit like, oh shit, I need to get back on my game, you know. So a big one that I always say to people is practicing gratitude, you know, just really practicing gratitude. That's like a real click for me to get back into my spiritual health. Walking down the road, I know this might sound silly to people, but if you walk down the road and you smile to yourself and the people who are listening, give yourself a little smile now. Like literally, I know you might feel like a bit weird doing it, but there's something called the half smile, and it's basically smiling but without showing your teeth. A little half smile, you know, like that kind of little smirk thing that you do. There's something about that washes gratitude over you. I don't know what it is, but it does. And that sometimes can just be all you need to just feel that sense of gratitude, and just look around and just look for something beautiful, like, you know, a flower, you know, a mother and their kid, you know, something beautiful that you see, and let that pull the gratitude from you.
Perfect. I think that's the absolute best place to leave it. Thank you so much, Zoe, for jumping on. Where can people find you?
Instagram is probably my main source, really. So I'm at Zoe Dunlea Mindset Coach. There's everything on there. You'll see all my reels trying to get people to wake up, all my posts trying to get people to kind of wake up and see what they have, the power that they have. Instagram would be my main place, really.
Excellent. Thank you so much for jumping on, Zoe, and thank you all for listening in again for this episode of the podcast. I will chat to you all again next week. Have a good one.
Thanks, Robbie. Thanks, guys.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're looking to learn more about what we do, as well as check out any of the mobility and rehab programs we have available, just head over to the description of this podcast and you will find a link to all the programs there. As always, thank you for listening, and I will chat to you all again in the next episode. Have a good one.